If you have a true strange or scary story you'd like to share with the channel, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to send it my way. Also, if you're new, please do consider subscribing as it does help the channel grow tremendously. And of course, thank you. Hey everybody. I was randomly suggested this subreddit by a Reddit notification, and after reading a couple of posts and realizing there was a popular shadow person tag here, I thought I would share my own experience from when I was a child, with the entity that I've called the Shadow Girl for as long as I can remember. It should be said that I'm 19, male, now, and all three of the events I'm about to describe happened when I was pretty young, from around 6 to 8. When I was younger and my parents were still married, it was me, my one older brother, my 2 younger sisters, and my parents, obviously. My dad is in a very high post-secondary educational position, which he got when we were young in Winnipeg, where I still live now. As he was in the process of getting this position, we lived half the time in Winnipeg as we looked for a place to live there, and half the time in a house across the US border in Pembina. We eventually got a house in Winnipeg, and we slowly moved into that house from the Pembina house over some period of time. I don't really remember how long, but it isn't important. The first encounter. I was in the 2nd grade when I saw her at our newer house. I had come home from school and very soon after, decided that I wanted to play Minecraft on our family tablet, which was kept charging in my parents' room on the 2nd floor of our house. I ran up our curved staircase and turned right immediately through the doorway of my parents' room. As I entered and stood to face my parents' bed, the tablet directly across the room from the foot of their bed, I saw her. I stood completely in shock. The pitch-black silhouette of a young girl in a puffy dress was sitting on the foot of my parents' bed and staring straight forward at the wall ahead of her. I didn't know what to do, but I felt paralyzed as I watched her. She ever so slowly turned her head to look at me with these saucer-like white eyes. Just an absence of black on her face, where instead was white, and those were her eyes. I slowly leaned out of my parents' doorway after a couple of seconds of eye contact and yelled downstairs, "Dad? Dad?" But nothing back. And so as I peeked into the room, she was gone. Just gone. I was afraid, and so I stepped carefully but still retrieved the tablet and scurried downstairs as if something were nipping at my ankles. Pembina is a small town now, and it was even smaller when I was young. In our house, which we called the Little House, or the Pembina House, there was a very creepy basement, a main floor and a 2nd floor. My brother and I shared the room on the 2nd floor, as did my sisters, and my parents slept in a room on the main floor. Now, the second encounter. I don't remember the context for why I was going to my room or anything, or how far apart this was from the first encounter. But I rounded a corner to enter the stairwell, and I remember distinctly I was looking at my feet on the first 2 steps. I then looked up the stairs and froze as I saw her at the top of the stairs. Again, just staring at me. I don't know what had gotten into me at this time, but I was annoyed enough at this thing for showing up that I went up the stairs at a full sprint to try to catch her. I watched as her whole body just turned without lifting her legs, and walked so slowly around the corner and up the stairs which led to the 2nd floor just past the corner. I made it to the top, and surprise, surprise, she was nowhere. I looked in every room upstairs, and nothing. She had disappeared again. And then the last encounter. This happened at our Pembina house. I was a very outdoorsy kid and loved catching bugs and collecting rocks and building forts and everything. It was awesome. in our backyard, and I had caught a butterfly with a glass from our kitchen and decided that the best place to store it was in my sister's closet, under a glass, with a single branch. My logic was that it would be safe and not be found or stolen by anyone since my sisters didn't use their closet. I slid a piece of paper under the glass to seal the butterfly in, and I remember that the paper had a drawing I had done of the iron robot from that animated kids movie of the same name. Very crudely drawn, but I remember that fun detail. Anyway, the next day I went back, up the stairs to the second floor, into my sister's closet, and to my surprise, discovered a very dead butterfly. I was very sad, and I looked out my sister's window at that moment and immediately caught her gaze. She was standing far out in our yard, very far, but she was looking up at me through the window. I put down the butterfly and slowly walked to the window, not breaking eye contact. After about a minute of her staring, she once again turned without moving her legs and almost floated off to the side, out of view behind a hedge. To this day, I have no explanation further than her being a shadow person, and I was first introduced to that revelation in the 6th grade, when I was reading a Haunted Canada book which had a story detailing a shadow person. I hope people don't think that I'm just making things up, as I tried to include every detail I could remember. To this day, I'm still scared that she's watching sometimes, but it's just paranoia, I'm sure, since I haven't seen her since then. Anyways, if people liked this, I have a lot more ghost encounters that my whole family has experienced after my parents' divorce, which I'd be happy to share. And have a great day, and thank you for reading. Hey everyone. I'm a longtime lurker to this sub, and I'm a personal believer in Bigfoot and other supernatural things, but I've never posted anything about it anywhere. Until now, of course. But to be honest, I don't really think it was a Bigfoot that I witnessed in the story I'm about to tell. More so, I'm just looking for answers as to what I saw. Suggestions to subs that may help are also welcomed, as I'm a noob when it comes to Reddit. Alas, here is my encounter with something I cannot explain. This happened about 4 years ago in the small town of Chihuahua, Washington. My girlfriend, now ex, not that it really matters for the story, and I decided to plan a getaway trip for a long weekend in a yurt, since we both love nature and going places far from the city. In the middle of nowhere, it seemed like a good time. And it truly was a great time. The thing that struck me most about staying in that yurt was just how dark and quiet it was at nighttime in the middle of the night. When you're not used to the wilderness, it's quite striking how silent things can be, and how dark the outside is when there's no light pollution involved. The outhouse where you had to go to the bathroom was about 75 yards away from the yurt, and you had to take a flashlight with you to navigate the darkness. The first night we were there, nature called and I went outside to find the bathroom. I shined the flashlight that cut through the darkness like a lightsaber around, and spotted eyeshine. It was nothing more than a good-sized female deer, but I would have no idea she was there if I didn't see its eyes via the flashlight. The actual encounter happened our last night there at approximately 11 p.m. to midnight. We were playing cards inside the yurt by the fire when, out of nowhere, we heard this huge crash/bang on the side of the yurt. Almost as if something threw itself into the side of it, or was running and didn't see it there until it was too late kind of thing. Obviously startled, we wanted to see what had made such a sound. As we were in the middle of nowhere, but we were still on a property, and not very deep in the woods for it to have been a bear or mountain lion. At least, I thought so. What happens next is hard to explain. I threw the door open, and I shined my flashlight like I did the night prior, when I saw the deer. And I saw something in the same spot, but it was different. It had no eye shine, and I only saw it for a moment, but it looked like it was white or gray, and it had a slender build to it. What creeped me out was the way that it moved. It seemed to crouch down while looking in my direction, slinking away out of frame like a big cat or a monkey might move out of the way. And then I never saw anything after that. I didn't try to investigate because, crap, I was scared. I thought it might have been a cougar or something, and I was not trying to die in front of my girlfriend, even if she left me not long after this. That aside, whatever I saw was unlike anything I've seen before, and I couldn't make out a face. I read on a post on this sub earlier today that someone had a Bigfoot encounter of it crawling across the ground. And for whatever reason, it made me remember this encounter, and it sent shivers down my spine. I'm not saying it was a Bigfoot. Hell, it could have been something normal, I guess. I did only see it for maybe a few seconds at most. But I've never seen anything move like that in real life, or even in a movie or TV show. It was strange. And I'm sorry if I'm rambling, but I guess I'm wondering if anyone has had any similar encounters or an explanation for what I could have seen. I have an experience that I wanted to share because it's been so strange. I don't think it's necessarily scary, but definitely weird. I don't know if it'll fit anywhere on your podcast, but I wanted to send it in either way. It may have something to do with glitches or parallel universes or something, but I don't really know. I've been doing a lot of reading about these kinds of things, and obviously I listen to your show, so maybe my brain was influenced a bit by that. One of the things that I read was that strange things tend to happen between 3 and 4 in the morning. Something about it being the witching hour. And the other day I was online, I think I was on Reddit actually, and as I was scrolling down whatever subreddit it was, I noticed that every single post said it had been posted 3 days ago. I scrolled for a while and I swear every single post was posted 3 days ago. This wasn't an unpopular subreddit, so for it to not have any posts for 3 full days, that would be a bit weird, right? It could have been a site glitch, and I know it's not a huge deal, but it's something that I wanted to mention, and there is more to all this, I promise. The next day, my boyfriend decided to stay over. We're not living together yet, and we don't get to see each other as often as we'd like. So he comes over sometimes and just stays the night. We're both night owls, so it was once again about 3-something in the morning when he gets up and says that he wants a glass of juice. Nothing too crazy about that, but then I hear him shout from the kitchen, "Hey, your milk went bad 3 days ago." At first, it didn't mean much, but then I kind of just rolled the words around in my head and thought about the whole 3 days thing. I mentioned it was weird that it was exactly 3 days ago, and he laughed, asking why it was weird. I sort of explained it to him, but he laughed it off, and we moved on. The next day, as I was pulling out of my parking spot at my apartment, one of my neighbors was pulling through and not paying enough attention, and they clipped the back end of my car. It wasn't a huge deal, but we did the whole stop and look at our cars thing. They pulled into the spot next to mine, and we were both behind our cars exchanging information when I looked over at their car, and they had a temp tag that had expired. I absentmindedly said, "Oh, hey, your temp tag expired 3 days ago." I didn't even do the math in my head. It was just instinctual. And worse yet, it was factual. Their tag had expired 3 days prior. Thankfully, they had insurance and it all ended up fine. With the damage, I mean. On the next day, which I would like to mention is when the first day that I noticed the 3 days ago thing would be exactly 3 days ago, was an incredibly weird day involving the number 3. I grabbed coffee, and it was $3 even. It wasn't fancy, just basic coffee. I pulled into my work and noticed a license plate that was a vanity plate that was 333. I had a meeting that started at 2 that was supposed to end at 3, but it went on until exactly 3:33 p.m. I watched the clock during the whole meeting. The elevator when I left work stopped on the 3rd floor, and no one was there to get in. Then, when I walked up to the door at my apartment complex, there were 3 perfectly black, round, and smooth stones sitting on the welcome mat to the building. It sent a chill down my spine. I was kind of freaking out about the whole 3 thing, and I was honestly thinking that I was about to die or something. Like this was some kind of weird omen telling me that my time was up. I wanted to grab them, as they were neat stones, like super smooth river rock, but I decided that if this were an omen, I needed to not acknowledge it and just let whatever was going to happen, happen. What's crazy is that after that, there were no more 3s. There was nothing crazy that happened, and I didn't notice anything else that was out of place. I don't understand why those 3 days were so weird, why there were so many 3s that happened on the 3rd day, and I honestly don't want to know if I passed up some crazy happening by ignoring the stones or something. I'm glad to have gotten away from it all, but I'm still very weirded out. Like I said, this wasn't too scary, but it was an incredibly strange set of circumstances. This is just a thing that's been in my mind since it happened. At the time of this posting, it's been a while. This happened on August 27th, 2024, in the state of Oklahoma in the US. So, for some context, I live in a rural area that is currently being made into a big town. New stores, new neighborhoods, the whole 9. It's still in the early days, so it's all in construction. So my neighborhood still has woodlands on one side and just open land for a few miles on another. Since the first night that I've come out here, I've always felt like I'm being watched if I'm outside. Sometimes it's not as direct, as if it's acknowledging my presence, but I'm not its priority, if that makes sense. But other times, it felt that I was the only thing it was looking at, especially at night. And I've done the dumb things, like challenging it by walking further out into my tree-scattered yard, blocking the moonlight in places. Although some of those times were on purpose, I had to feel comfortable walking in my own backyard. So each time I did, I stayed longer, and went further out until I finally got freaked out and went back inside. The entire time, I state my intent. Whether I'm just going to retrieve something or simply saying I'm only walking because this is my backyard, but that I mean no disrespect. I even began to say that I respected its presence and I don't mind it staying. But I don't appreciate it trying to make me feel scared in my own home. While I acknowledge that this was its home first, my situation was not one of choice of me living here specifically. I've made this known every time I felt its presence prioritize me. This has been happening for a while now, but its threatening/protective presence began to fade, and it was more of curiosity. At least it felt that way to me. I may be misinterpreting it, but the threatened fear presence started to go away. And while it started out happening only at night, I began to feel it around me during the day. When this started happening, I started finding feathers on the ground. While yes, I live where a lot of birds are, I haven't found any in the time I've been living here until this happened. Each time I was genuinely ecstatic to find one. It started out with just 1 or 2 a day, and then it increased to about 10 a day. I have a full jar of feathers now. It was blue jays mostly for a while, and then others started appearing. I literally turned around and an owl feather was floating in the air in front of me. I just stared at it while it landed softly on the ground. That was my absolute favorite one to find so far, even trumping the raven and juvenile hawk feather that I have. After finding the one owl feather, I found about 5 smaller tufts of owl feathers the next day. This continued happening for a few months with the blue jay feathers, and as it's begun to turn colder, there are less birds. One day, a couple of weeks after the owl feathers, I was taking my dogs outside and was just walking through the yard, talking to my dogs, as any slightly sane person does. And I felt its presence again. I smiled, because at this point it's become familiar and I enjoy it. Well, out of the corner of my eye, something moves. While I have always felt its presence, I have never had such a physical reaction as I did when I turned to watch this figure step out behind a tree on the opposite end of the yard than me. I feel the goosebumps form on my arm as if ice had just been brushed across them. Every single hair on my arms, neck, back of my head stood. I stared, and I had trouble understanding what I was seeing for a second. Across the yard stood a figure with furs draped across them, and hide clothing. They had bones and sticks tied in places, and on their heads sat a skull with the biggest antlers I have ever seen. Their eyes laid behind the sockets as if wearing it as a mask. It locked eyes with me, nodded, and then took a step and disappeared. 2 of my dogs were barking at something across the street, while my third, who is very independent and doesn't like to cuddle, watched this thing and then stepped closer to me. So I know I saw it, because my dog acknowledged it, but it's still throwing me for a loop. Edit. As I answer or reply to comments, I've realized more has happened than I thought. After the night of seeing said entity, I would hear coyotes every time I went outside for about a week straight. But one night definitely stood out. My partner had come home late from work, and we did our usual routine of make food and then step out for a smoke and let the dogs out. Well, we did this, but this time, we kept the dogs on a leash. We normally don't, but for some reason we did. I don't remember why now. It was quiet while we walked the dogs, let them do their business, and as usual, I felt eyes on me. Now, at this point, I'm somewhat used to it, so I acknowledge it, and say I'm just letting my dogs go to the bathroom and I'll go back to the porch. But when I said this, the feeling of getting to the porch got urgent, which hasn't happened in months. This confused me, and I tried to shake it off and repeat what I said, but then something fell around the trees on the opposite side of the yard. Of course, me and my dog looked up and over. Immediately, there was a little whisper of a thought that said, porch. And so we made our way back. More things kept snapping or falling, but it didn't feel as dangerous anymore. We waited a bit, and it stopped, and we finally relaxed. My partner and I stood while we talked, just enjoying the stars when the coyotes started going. Usually they're like a mile away, but this sounded just on the other side of the fence. Now, I know they weren't right there, but that's how loud it was. They've never been this close before. They sounded angry too, like they had something surrounded. I had a sense of worry, but also was just in awe at the sounds of nature. I felt bad for whatever poor creature they had, but there was something beautiful about nature still happening as construction takes place around it. After it got silent, there was a bird call. It was far away and I don't have the best hearing, so I couldn't tell what it was, but it stuck in the back of my mind as we talked. After a moment, it happened again, but this time I could make out the deeper tones in it. A few more moments, and I knew it was an owl. At this point, I realized it was getting closer, and now I've heard it before, and obviously I have the owl feathers, but I never heard when it's near. We stopped talking and just listened as it went from tree to tree, closer into our yard until it was on the edge of the closest one. I listened to it for what seemed like forever, but was about 10 to 15 minutes. It just sat there, calling out every now and then. Things began to snap on the other side of the yard, and my dog began to growl. I kept her calm, but her fur bristled. The owl called out again before diving at something and then taking off, and after this we absolutely went inside. Another thing I've noticed, like I've stated in a comment, was that since coming here, animals of all kinds seem to find me or be near me when they take their last breaths. It first happened with a snake. My dog found it, didn't touch it. I picked it up, seeing it had an injury, and went to look at it. It moved a little, and then stopped breathing. I teared up and took it to our fire pit as we were going to have a bonfire soon. I wanted to give it a little moment, you know? After this incident, it started happening with spiders and a lizard, and then recently a moth with a deformed wing. I brought the moth inside, gave it a slice of apple and let it eat off of it, and then set it on a log with some moss inside. I checked back later and it had passed. This doesn't happen often, but happens often enough that I've noticed it. I wanted to post about the time I was visiting relatives in Mexico, mid-1990s, and believe that me and my friends encountered a possible skinwalker. My ancestors came from a very small town, and back then everyone had outhouses due to no actual plumbing or even underground water lines. I believe this is still the case. It's pretty remote, and there are other surrounding towns with similar circumstances. There's hardly anything to do than to hang out, play some sports, go up near the mountains, etc. This one evening, we were hanging out with a buddy whose family owned a small store. I can't even remember all the stuff we were talking about now, but at some point, my cousins started talking about this old man that we all knew. As far as I can remember, he was probably in his late 60s, didn't have any family that I could recall, and he lived alone in his house/property. In my cousin's own words, quote, "He used to tell me how he would escape his enemies by disappearing. He said they would step all over him and that it would hurt, but that he needed to keep quiet so he wouldn't be discovered." End quote. Now, this old man already had a reputation for being a witch, and that's what some people referred to him as. I always thought the locals called him that because he was a bit antisocial, old, and had seemingly no friends. But my cousin would talk to him on occasion as we walked through town. Just a simple, "Hey mister, how's it going?" So, my cousin and the other kids from town that were talking about him and how mysterious he was, and that they believed he did indeed practice black magic. After we were done talking, it was probably around 10 p.m. The store had already been closed since like 6 or so, and my buddy wanted to keep it shut so that we could keep talking about whatever without anyone listening. So once we left, this old man's house was about 3 properties away from the store, and while we were still talking about it, he was apparently looking over his adobe wall, which was maybe 6 foot tall. And he was not as tall as that, so he may have been standing on a chair. He was leaning over the wall and had the creepiest ear-to-ear smile on his face while kind of nodding his head up and down and watching us walk down the road. This road, like many others, wasn't paved. Again, a very small town with very little 20th century features. And at that point, we were all creeped out, and it scared the crap out of us. Of course, there's no way to tell if he really was a skinwalker, but at that point, I firmly believed that he was something evil, and I wanted nothing to do with him. The reason I think he was a walker, years later, is because in that small town, like just about every other Mexican small town, there are always certain people that are accused of practicing black magic. Most of these times, these people are accused of being lechuzas, which are supposed to be witches that transform into owls. So the fact my cousin said that he could disappear, I figure now that means he can transform. And that's why I believe he is a walker. Did his black magic powers help him realize we were talking about him? Because otherwise, what the hell was he doing leaning over the wall with that creepy smile like that? At a time of night when most people were asleep. Just thought that was weird and ominous. Most times, people refer to walkers as folks in the US, particularly natives. But now that I think about it, skinwalkers have always been prevalent in Mexico. Except we don't call them that. However, one should be able to see the overlapping culture between Mexico and native Indian tribes. I've got a handful more stories of my encounters in Mexico, and I'll post them on a different day. So, I recently moved to Wisconsin, and I wanted to explore the back country 2 falls ago. So I took a trip from the south to Superior, mostly off-road and on fire roads and whatnot. On my second night, I was in the Northwoods and it was getting late, so I was on a back road in heavy forest, and decided to find a spot to sleep in my truck. I went down a dirt road, probably 2 miles or so down the dirt road. At this point, it was very dark, roughly 8 p.m. and absolutely no one for miles. I found a trail in the forest and drove about 100 foot into the woods and parked, completely concealed from the dirt road I was just on. I got out to assess the area, but I could not see anything as it was completely dark. I got back in the truck and then set up for the night. About an hour into watching a movie on my phone, I heard a sound that sounded like a woman screaming, and my dog heard it too. I grabbed my pistol, turned on all my lights, and opened the door to see what it was. Mind you, absolutely no one knew that I was out there, and was far from civilization. I didn't see anyone or hear anyone, so I ducked back into my truck. I was a little freaked out, but figured it was wildlife. I don't know, I rationalized it. About an hour later, I was falling asleep and felt my truck move as if someone pushed on it. Again, my dog woke up too, so I knew it wasn't my imagination. I did not turn on any lights or make a sound, but my dog seemed uneasy. I told myself that if I heard anything else, I would get out of Dodge. Well, I ended up falling asleep, and around midnight, I woke up to my dog growling, and it happened again. I put on my boots, hopped into the driver's seat, and got out of there. As I was driving out, I went around a corner on the dirt road, and I'm not sure if it was my imagination or what, but I swear I saw a tall, skinny thing running off the road as I came around the corner. It took about 30 minutes to get down the road because I continued down the original dirt road and did not go back the way I came. By this point, it was raining pretty hard, and I didn't feel comfortable being anywhere dark. I drove an hour and finally found a gas station, and ended up staying the night there. I've never been so scared in my life, and it takes a lot to get me feeling that way. I don't know what it was, but I know it was not human, whatever was out there. I know that much. So, that, my friends, was a collection of some strange and scary stories from Reddit. I haven't done a Reddit collection in a long time. My stories have all been crowdsourced from you, beautiful people, of course. But I kind of wanted to do something from Reddit. So, also had a bit of a gap I needed to fill in a while back. Went and requested all these. I've gotten a ton of, submissions, stories sent in to me since then. But yeah, the truth is, I wanted to do a Reddit collection because I haven't done one in a while. So, yeah. Hopefully, you all enjoyed this Reddit collection. I did. Good stories, interesting stories, a lot of different stories. Some cryptid encounters, weird stuff with threes, weird presence encounters. I don't know, just really strange and scary stuff. Some really creepy stories, and I really enjoyed them. So a huge thank you to everyone who let me read their story. You all are amazing and have helped the channel more than you know. Hopefully, you, listeners, my lovely listeners, enjoyed these stories, and if you did, please do consider hitting the like button on the video. You can also subscribe to the channel if you're new and haven't done so already. And if you're feeling bold, go down below the video and leave me a comment with your thoughts, how you're doing, how your week went, how your week went, and how your weekend is going so far. It's almost over, but hopefully it's going well. Yeah. We're going to be driving back to Kansas to kind of finish collecting everything into one room to get it loaded and go. There's not a lot left. We did the U-Haul. We got all the big stuff, but there's just enough stuff left to warrant, like, stress levels, if that makes sense. There's a few things that can't fit in my Prius, so we're going to have to do something. Probably rent another U-Haul. But if we rent another U-Haul, it'll be everything, right? Like, it won't be just the few big things, which is, like, the deep freeze and the exercise bike and the few other things, but it'll be everything, including the small things, so at least there's that. That'll be the last time. I don't know. It's just, it's exhausting moving, and moving cross states is exhausting too, so I don't know. Life goes on. I don't mean to complain about it if I'm complaining a lot. I'm trying not to. It's just a lot of stuff. That's all. So that's what's going on in my life. You know what? Let's talk about things I did that were positive. I replaced the shower head upstairs in the house, and I replaced the shower curtain downstairs in the basement where the basement shower is, because the people that owned this before, like, did like a chunk of Flex Seal on the tile and just drilled into that for the shower curtain rod, and it looked so terrible. So I ripped that out of the wall, and I bought a ceiling track for it and installed a ceiling track around the shower for the shower curtain, because it's just a corner stall. So pretty proud of that. Anyways, I love y'all. Hope you're having a beautiful day. Hope I see you again here soon. But until then, remember, you are loved. You are valid. You are important. You're the best that you can be. Don't forget it. Until next time, my friends, much love and sleep well.